Hi everyone, I'm Sue Hillyard. Welcome to the EA Zoom meeting, Eclipse Seasons with Aquarius Mars Retro. Okay. As my research for this meeting proceeded with the planned topic of eclipses, I discovered a pattern with Mars retrograde, considerable grief in deciding whether to call this eclipse seasons with Mars retrograde and sometimes out of bounds, or Aquarius Mars retrograde and sometimes out of bounds with eclipse seasons. Either way, we're going to look at 3 years of them. 1939 when retrograde Mars was square the nodes, 1979 when it was conjunct the north node, and 2018 when it is conjunct the south node. And then sometimes Mars goes out of bounds during the retrograde. On June 26, 2018, Mars went retrograde at 9 degrees Aquarius, 13 minutes, conjunct the south node. Mars retrograde occurs the least often of all the planetary retrogrades, about every 2 years, approximately 24 to 26 months. Mars retrograde in Aquarius is the rarest of the Mars retrogrades. There was one 47 years ago in 1971, and 32 years before that in 1939. Both 1971 and 2018's Mars retrogrades in Aquarius are conjunct a lunar node. The north node was Aquarius in 1971. Mars crossed over the north node 3 times. The south node is Aquarius in 2018. Retrograde Mars will eventually go over the south node 3 times. 1939's Mars retrograde in Aquarius will square the nodes. July and August 1971 and 2018 also have 2 solar eclipses and 1 lunar as a solar Saros cycle ends while another one begins. Mars goes out of bounds during its 2018 retrograde starting on July 7th, as it also did in 1939, adding more of an unpredictable, anything-goes dynamic flavor to the mix. A planet is considered out of bounds when it gets beyond the bounds of the sun or greater than 23 degrees, 27 minutes, north or south declination. Many astrologers attribute a Uranian influence to an out-of-bounds planet. So adding out-of-bounds to retro of all the above. When Mars was retrograde in Aquarius in 1939, it was also applying to a square of the nodes in Scorpio and Taurus, with the resolution node being the north node in Scorpio. However, it didn't actually square the nodes until they had gone into Libra and Aries, and Mars had retrograded back into Capricorn and then gone direct on September 22nd, 1939. The square occurred at 29 degrees and 44 minutes of Libra, Aries, and Capricorn, with Saturn exactly conjunct the south node. Jeffrey Wolf Green taught that a planet squaring the nodes talks about a skip step, indicating flipping back and forth between the nodes in order to evolve that planet's function. He said that the node the planet last crossed is the one that most aids that evolution process, and is called the resolution node. In this case, Mars last crossed over the north node at 15 degrees Scorpio, 58 minutes in January of 1939, so the north node is the resolution node here. The ruler of the north node, Pluto, went into Leo for good on June 14th, 1939, after entering briefly in 1938. In 1939, Mars went out of bounds the day after turning retrograde, getting to extreme out of bounds in July and August. Also, from 1939 to 2018, the south node of Neptune has been between about 11 and 12 degrees Aquarius. This time, and in 1939, didn't quite reach the south node of Neptune, before turning direct. And in 1971, it passed over it before going retrograde, but didn't quite get back to it before it went direct. Planetary declination is measured in degrees. The planet is described as so many degrees north or south of the equator. The celestial equator extends into space from the equator of the Earth. The North Star is at about plus 90 degrees, while the South Pole would be at minus 90 degrees, just like latitude on Earth. If the moon transits through 22 degrees north, while Venus transits through 22 degrees south of the equator, they would be in contraparallel to one another. A planet is considered out of bounds when its declination is beyond the outer bounds or limits of that of the sun, that is, greater than 23 degrees and 27 minutes of declination, either north or south. The energies of these out-of-bound planets tend to be a little out of control or over the top during these periods. The words here are courtesy of cafeastrology.com, and the graphic is from signsandlife.com. For a further explanation of out-of-bounds, as an analogy, think of how the sun moves from north declination during summer in the northern hemisphere, declination in the northern hemisphere winter, and summer in the south, and how the sun appears higher or lower in the sky depending on the season. And when it is solstice time, the sun is neither north or south, but on the equator and rises directly east and sets due west. So, for example, Mars now appears lower in the sky than the path of the sun, as it is in extreme south latitude. I hope this helps. Cafeastrology.com has listed the out-of-bounds times for Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Jupiter from solar fire, which I found by Googling OOB planets. Gemini Brett's EA Zoom meeting last week covered the astronomy of declination and why Mars retrogrades happen in the summer months. He always seems to spark me to do further research. Gray Crawford, Eric Myers, and Gary Caton have also talked or written about these topics. Here are key dates for the 2018 Mars retrograde. I'll talk about these dates more later, adding in a few events that have occurred around them, but this outlines details in red and eclipses in black. On June 26, 2018, Mars turned retrograde at 9 Aquarius 18. The caret in 47 before the entry indicates that it's been 47 years since the previous Mars retrograde in Aquarius. And the red arrows point to the beginning, middle, and end of the Mars retrograde. So the planned topic of this talk was originally the 2018 eclipses, but it morphed recently when Daniel Fiverson presented an EA Zoom meeting showing a list of the previous Mars retrogrades in Aquarius. I saw a pattern that needed exploring, had to dig deeper and share. So soon after going retrograde on July 8th, Mars also went out of bounds. Then July 12th, we had a partial solar eclipse. July 20th, Mars was conjunct the south node. July 26th, the sun opposed Mars. This was the middle of the Mars retrograde and a day before the 7/27 lunar eclipse. A month later, August 27th, September 24th. Here's the list of Mars retrogrades in Aquarius from 1687 to 2097 that came as a result of Daniel's EA Zoom talk. I won't read them all, but will say that it's illustrating the following pattern I saw emerging. First, Mars is retrograde 2 times square the nodes with alternating resolution nodes. Next, 3 times it's conjunct a node, alternating north is second conjunction with the north node. It doesn't quite reach the north node before going retrograde. And also notice that this one is 47 years after the last, instead of alternating 32, 47, 32, 47. And after 2018, the next Mars retrograde in the series is one that doesn't quite reach the north node before going retrograde, begins at 27 Capricorn 23, and will be completely in Capricorn, whereas the previous ones have been mostly in Aquarius, although increasingly moving further back into Capricorn. A precession of sorts, I guess. Is this suggesting a cyclic revisiting of the past in order to heal and then head to the future? Adding in the sign that contained Saturn and Uranus as traditional and modern rulers of Aquarius, as well as the placement of Pluto, would add another layer to this story. There also appears to be a pattern of Mercury and/or Venus retrograde with Mars retrograde, but we'll save the rest of this for another time. Does anybody have a question or a comment at this point? I'll take that as a no. Okay, moving back in time for a bit. In my research, I noticed that there were what I refer to as callbacks between sensitive starting and ending points of Aquarius Mars retrograde periods and eclipses, where there are eclipses on degrees where Mars retrograde occurred and vice versa. Let's start with a little background for going forward, some events in 1892 that seem to be variations on a theme for later Mars Aquarius retrogrades. Ellis Island first opened to allow European immigrants into the United States in 1892. After a merger of 2 companies, General Electric Company came into existence and was incorporated. Thomas Edison was awarded a patent for his telegraph. The Pledge of Allegiance was first recited in public schools in the US. Grover Cleveland was elected president with 7 more than the 270 electoral votes needed. The Sierra Club was founded. Rudolph Diesel applied for a patent for his invention of the diesel engine. And this was also the year that Sir Frederick Stanley donated the Stanley Cup. If anyone has a correlation for that, please let me know. So for the sake of starting someplace, the eclipse next week on August 11th is opposite the Mars retrograde point of 1892. The Mars direct in 1892 was within 3 degrees of the Mars retrograde point in 1939, and last week's lunar eclipse, as well as lunar eclipses in 1939 and 1979, right before the start of World War II, is very close to next summer's lunar eclipse and was also near the solar eclipse of January 1972. The Mars retrograde point of 1971 reflected the lunar eclipse 5 months previous. The retrograde Venus star point of 2015, a lunar eclipse in 2017, and the coming Venus star point in August 2019 are all opposite this 1971 Mars retrograde point. Mars went direct in 1971, conjunct the south node of Neptune, where there was also a lunar eclipse in 2018 and one in 1971. Back to 2018 with more details. June 26, Mars turned retrograde, conjunct the moon's south node within a degree of the January 1972 lunar eclipse. As an aside, in May of 1946, Mars was conjunct Pluto at 9 degrees Leo and 32 minutes. And Pluto will be opposite this particular point in 2029. Here are some fun facts. The Soviet ballistic missile program was formally created by a top secret decree signed by Joseph Stalin on May 13, 1946. And Donald Trump, whose Pluto is 10 degrees Leo, was born a month later on June 14th at a full moon lunar eclipse. His Mercury is out of bounds, 25 degrees and some latitude. In 1971 and 72 in the US was a time when people were very uneasy about the Vietnam War and Nixon's lies, similar to the way people are becoming about Trump's lies now. I've already mentioned last week's lunar eclipse at 4 degrees Aquarius and 45 minutes with respect to 1939's Mars retrograde, but the moon's south node during the July 12, 2018 solar eclipse in Cancer is also close to that same point. On August 27th, 2018, Mars turns direct at 28 degrees Capricorn, 55 minutes. This calls back to the solar eclipse in July of 1971. In 2065, Mars turns retrograde at 27 Capricorn 23, conjunct the North Node, which calls back to this year's Mars direct and the July 22nd, 1971 solar eclipse. The 2065 Mars direct at 15 Capricorn 56 references next year's January 5th, 2019 solar eclipse, which will be at 15 Capricorn 25. And then 32 years later, the 2097 Mars retrograde at 13 Aquarius 14 will revisit the 1971 lunar eclipse conjunct the North Node, the 1939 lunar eclipse, and a 2023 lunar eclipse. The 2097 Mars direct point calls back to last week's July 27th, 2018 lunar eclipse conjunct Mars. Any comments?
Just wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. I have to share this, I said. Okay, so here's a table of the 2018 eclipses with the North Node in Leo and South Node Aquarius from my previous EA Zoom meeting last November. A quick recap: for solar eclipses, odd zeros are on the North Node and even are on the South Node. For lunar eclipses, it's the opposite, whereas odd zeros and NA in the Brady-Saros column, so titled for Bernadette Brady's eclipse naming system, indicates that she includes lunar eclipses with the solar series of that season. The asterisk is to point out that we have two overlapping cycles in this season. Saros cycle number 117 began in 792 AD and will end in two more events on August 3rd, 2054, with a marginal eclipse covering just 7% of the sun. The first event in 1928 of Saros cycle number 155 which Brady calls 2 New North, was a partial eclipse covering only 4% of the sun at its maximum. The second event was on June 29, 1946, 2 weeks after Trump was born. The solar eclipse on August 11, 2018 is the 6th of 71 in this series. It will be a partial eclipse at the North Node, only covering 74% of the sun at its maximum and falls within 9 minutes of my Pluto. The solar eclipse on July 12, 2018 was at the North Node, a small partial eclipse visible from a patch of ocean between Australia and Antarctica. As just 34% of the sun was covered for viewers closest to the center, Moonblink noted that this was of limited interest. However, it was conjunct my ascendant and was opposite Pluto on its own south node. This solar eclipse before the next to last of Saros cycle number 117 was at 20 degrees Cancer 41 minutes, opposite Pluto at 21 Capricorn even, 20 degrees Capricorn even. It is just about as far from the North Node as it can be and still be an eclipse. 15 degrees and 12 minutes from the North Node at 5 degrees Leo, 53, and opposite Pluto, which is conjunct its own planetary south node. It's conjunct the south node of Saturn and Black Moon Lilith as well. The nodes of Pluto are exactly opposite one another too, which does not always happen. So what might this mean from an evolutionary astrology perspective? Well, as I suggested previously, I'm hoping it is the beginning of the end for Capricornian fear and oppression in favor of Cancerian nurturing. Here are the 2019 eclipses, with next summer's callback to the August 23rd, 1939 Mars station direct, noting that on September 1st, 1939, World War II started. Also, the January 16th, 1972 solar eclipse was on 25 Capricorn 25. A year from now, where will we be? The nodes will have moved into Cancer and Capricorn by then. Saturn will also be within orb of its conjunction to Pluto, which occurs on January 12th, 2020. So does anybody have any questions or any observations? Okay, going back to the 1972 eclipses, there's a callback from the January 16th one to the August 23rd, 1939 Mars station direct point of 23 Capricorn 56, which occurred right before World War II began. One could say it has also a call forward to the July 2019 lunar eclipse at 24 Capricorn 04, and also calling back to 1972 is the 2018 Mars retrograde. It began at 9 Aquarius 13, opposite the January 72 lunar eclipse. The first solar eclipse this summer was at 20 Cancer 41, and the lunar eclipse was 4 Aquarius 45. So let me mention a couple of snippets from January 1972 here. January 1st, 1972, Kurt Waldheim of Austria became the 4th Secretary General of the United Nations, succeeding U Thant. Waldheim served 2 5-year terms. It was only after he became president of Austria in 1986 that the world learned that Waldheim had been a Nazi officer who had been investigated by the UN War Crimes Commission. January 25th of 1972, in a nationally televised address, President Nixon revealed that Henry Kissinger had been secretly negotiating with North Vietnamese leaders and announced a plan for peace that can end the war in Vietnam. North Vietnam rejected the proposal the next day. Here are the 1971 eclipses showing one solar series ending as another begins, just like this year. 32 years after our next Aquarius Mars retrograde in 2065, on June 30th, 2097, Mars will turn retrograde at 13 Aquarius 48, calling back to this lunar eclipse in 1971, and a square to the May 3rd, 1939 lunar eclipse at 12 Scorpio 17. These will also be referenced in a May 5th, 2023 lunar eclipse at 14 Scorpio 58. And you may have noticed that this August 20th, 1971 solar eclipse at 27 Leo 15 is conjunct last summer's Great American Eclipse at 28 Leo 53, and almost exactly opposite the February 15th, 2018 solar eclipse at 27 Aquarius 08. Two more callbacks to 1971. Now let's look at the chart of 1939's Mars retrograde. As I said earlier, last week's lunar eclipse at 4:45 Aquarius conjunct this 1939 retrograde point of 4 Aquarius 42, calling back to that time. Many have been reflecting on that period of time as recent events have unfolded in the world. Here you can see from the table of declinations, right here, you can see my cursor moving around, that Mercury and Pluto were both out of bounds, or more than 23 degrees, 27 minutes north or south of the celestial equator. Mars also followed out of bounds the next day. Pluto was out of bounds from January 25th through June 24th of 1939, which is the day after Mars turned retrograde. Mercury was out of bounds June 7th to June 25th, and on June 23rd, 1939, the day after turning retrograde, Mars also went out of bounds, then becoming extremely out of bounds in July and August of 1939, up to 27 degrees south latitude, 23 minutes. This year, out of bounds Mars gets to 26 south 30 in mid-August, so not quite as far out of bounds as 1939, for what that's worth. As Mars turned retrograde in 1939, it had not yet reached a square to the nodes, but was within 3 degrees. Mars and Pluto had recently opposed one another in Capricorn and Cancer after the shadow period began. Here's the list of dates for the 1939 Mars retrograde. Because Mars opposed Pluto 3 times that year as part of the retrograde, I decided to also show when Pluto entered out of bounds early in the year because it seemed to have set the tone. A lunar eclipse occurred on May 3rd, 1939, post Pluto at 29 Capricorn and Cancer, a month before turning retrograde for the first time. Looking to the traditional and modern rulers of Aquarius, Saturn transited Aries when the retrograde began and moved into Taurus in early July. Uranus was in mid-Taurus. Meanwhile, Pluto went into Leo for good on June 14th, days before the retrograde began, and Mars opposed Pluto a second time 4 days before the middle of the Mars retrograde. Then the Sun opposed Mars at 29 Cancer and Capricorn on July 23rd, 2 days after Mars retrograded back into a Capricorn. Days later, on July 28, 1939, Mercury turned retrograde at 24 degrees Leo 13, as compared to our current Mercury retrograde at 23 degrees Leo 27. Mars turned direct on August 23rd, and then opposed Pluto one last time at 2 degrees of Aquarius and Leo before leaving the retrograde shadow in early October. And again, World War II began on September 1st, 1939. Here's an image from Sirius Software's graphic ephemeris, 5 months of planetary declinations from May 7th to October 7th of 1939. The vertical red lines indicate here the beginning of the Mars retrograde, the middle of the Mars retrograde when the Sun is opposed Mars, and then the end of the Mars retrograde. On the left, the arrows over here point to the lines depicting the declination of Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, and Pluto. The two horizontal red lines here and here represent the out of bounds point. So you can see Pluto's pink line over here is just barely above the line of the ecliptic on the left of the image. Mercury's blue one above it to the right of Pluto's, right about at the start of the Mars retrograde. And then Mars' purple line down here below the line after the retrograde starts. And here the moon doesn't cross the line either top or bottom any month, so it stays in bounds during this time frame. Here are the events surrounding the Mars retrograde in 1939. For time's sake, I'll only talk about the Mars opposite Pluto dates and when Mars changed direction. So on May 22nd, the Supreme Court decided a case that found a 12-day one-time voter registration window to be discriminatory for Black citizens and repugnant to the 15th Amendment, which had been created to guarantee the right to vote. On May 23rd was the first Mars opposition Pluto at 29 Capricorn and Cancer. That day, rescue efforts for the American submarine Squalus got underway, eventually saving 33 of the 59 crew members, who were 200 feet underwater. Previous rescues had only been done in up to 20 feet below the surface. Mars turned retrograde on June 22nd, 1939 at 4 Aquarius 42, square the nodes, with the north node as resolution node. That very day, Princess, future Queen Elizabeth, met her future husband, Prince Philip of Greece, and a discussion in the House of Commons was shut down by the Speaker for becoming too heated. On June 23rd, the next day after turning retrograde, Mars out of bounds began, and it would be extremely out of bounds in July and August. On that day, France and Turkey signed a mutual assistance pact. France renounced all claims to a province in southern Turkey, while Turkey promised aid to France in the event of aggression. The second Mars opposite Pluto occurred on July 19th at 0 degrees Leo and Aquarius and Leo 54. The second arrow points to 4 days later on July 23rd, where the Sun is opposite Mars at 29 Cancer and Capricorn, indicating the middle of the Mars retrograde. On that day, Mahatma Gandhi wrote directly to Adolf Hitler, addressing him as friend, and requested that he refrain from starting a war which may reduce humanity to the savage state. The letter never reached Hitler as it was intercepted by the British government. On August 23rd, 1939, the very day that Mars turned direct at 23 Capricorn 56, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union agreed not to attack each other and to remain neutral if attacked by a third power. The third Mars opposition Pluto was on September 30th, 1939 at 2 Aquarius and Leo 39. The next day, on October 1st, Royal Proclamation ordered all British men ages 20 to 23 to report for Army registration. And on October 4th, Hitler issued a secret decree granting an amnesty to all crimes committed by German military and police personnel in Poland between September 1st and October 4th. The decree justified the crimes as being natural responses to atrocities committed by the Poles. On October 5th, 1939, Mars reaches 4 degrees Aquarius 42 and ends the shadow period. If we have time, we'll come back to charts of folks born during this Mars retrograde, but in the meantime, for now, let's move on to 1971. The red arrows on the left point to the beginning, middle, and end of the Mars retrograde. Mercury went out of bounds soon after Mars retrograde shadow started. 32 years after the last Mars retrograde in Aquarius, on July 12, 1971, it turned retrograde. On July 22nd, there was a partial solar eclipse. On August 6th, a lunar eclipse. On August 9th, the middle of the Mars retrograde occurred with the Sun opposite Mars. 3 days later, Mercury turned retrograde. And on August 20th, 1971, the second solar eclipse of the season, And then Mercury turned direct conjunct the August 21st, 2017 eclipse point, dubbed the Great American Eclipse. On September 10th, Mars turned direct conjunct the north node of Neptune, and October 21st, 1971, Mars reached 21 Aquarius 57, and the shadow ends. Here's the 1971 Mars retrograde cycle with events of that time. Basically, India and Pakistan battles led to the birth of Bangladesh. Daniel Ellsberg leaked classified documents about UAPs. The Supreme Court ruled that the Pentagon Papers may be published on June 30th. The 26th Amendment, lowering the voting age in the United States to 18, was officially adopted on July 1st. Jim Morrison, lead singer of The Doors, is found dead in his bathtub in Paris on July 3rd. On July 12th, Mars turned retrograde at 21 Aquarius 57. And then almost to the middle of the retrograde on August 1st, 40,000 people attend the concert for Bangladesh in New York City. On August 9th, the Sun opposes Mars, the middle of the Mars retrograde. August 15th, Nixon implements a 90-day freeze on wages and prices to curb inflation. August 19th, Mars was conjunct the North Node at 5 Aquarius 56. August 20th, 1971, partial eclipse, solar eclipse at 27 Leo 15. And notice that the September 6th, 1971 Mercury direct point is the same degree as the August 1971 solar eclipse, 27 Leo, and conjunct the August 2017 solar eclipse degree. So September 9th was the Attica prison riot. September 10th, Mars stationed direct at 11 Aquarius 53. Following that, Britain expels 90 KGB and GRU officials. The UN admits the People's Republic of China and expels the Republic of China or Taiwan. The Silmar, California earthquake occurred. Mount Etna erupts. Intel releases the first microprocessor. Here's another image from Sirius Software's graphic ephemeris of the declinations from May 25th to October 25th of 1971. On the left are the titles of the lines depicting the motion of Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. The two horizontal lines, again, represent the out of bounds points. So you can see Venus slightly above the red line here on the left of this image, and Mars doesn't quite get below it down here on the right at the bottom. But in this season, Moon crosses below, above every month. The vertical lines up here at the top are the start of the Mars retrograde, the middle at the Sun opposition Mars, and the end of the Mars retrograde. So also in 1971, email was first sent in October. The floppy disk was invented. The Unix Programmer's Manual is published. And Donald Trump was promoted to president of the Elizabeth Trump and Sons Company, and later renamed it the Trump Organization, removing his grandmother's name. Okay, so now let's look at lives of some of those who were born during this Mars retrograde around this time in 1971. And as I've noted here, all of the biographical information I got from Wikipedia. So, first one, debated about skipping him, but Carter Page has been in the news lately, so I'll touch on him briefly. He was born on June 3rd, 1971. Mars was direct, but it went retrograde on July 12th, which for him was age 38. So he was an oil consultant and a Trump advisor. He's been a focus of the 2017 special counsel investigation into links between the Trump associates and Russian officials and the Russian interference on behalf of Trump during the 2016 presidential election. According to NPR, the FBI has released an application to conduct surveillance of an American under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. It's heavily redacted, but still significant. These are some of the most secret papers in official Washington and are very seldom ever seen by people without specialized security clearance. The dispute over the document boils down to this: did the Justice Department and the FBI violate the rights of a one-time junior foreign policy aide to the Donald Trump campaign, Carter Page? As you can see, in 2017, his progressed Mercury was opposite progressed Mars, and his progressed Moon went out of bounds. As many of the people born during this time experienced periodically every couple of weeks, so every 10 to 14 years, it would go out of bounds by progression. And I noted that in 2020, he will have a progressed new moon solar eclipse at the end of Cancer, and was wondering if this perhaps signified a new home for him. I'm skipping Mark Wahlberg. And going on to Tupac Shakur, 1971, with Mars at 18 degrees Aquarius conjunct the North Node. In 1972, his progressed Mercury went out of bounds at age 1. His parents were active members of the Black Panther Party in New York in the late 1960s and early 1970s. In 1987, progressed Mercury went back into bounds at age 16. In 1986, the family had moved from New York to Baltimore, Maryland. After completing his second year of high school, he transferred to the School for Arts. There he studied acting, poetry, jazz, and ballet. During his time in art school, he became affiliated with the Baltimore Young Communist League, USA, and began dating the daughter of the director of the local chapter of the Communist Party, USA. Tupac began his career as a roadie, backup dancer, and MC for the alternative hip-hop group Digital Underground, and was a vocal participant during the East Coast-West Coast hip-hop rivalry, becoming involved in conflicts with other rappers, producers, and record label staff members, most notably the notorious B.I.G. and his label, Bad Boy Records. Shakur was also an actor starring in 6 films and one TV show in the 1990s. He died on age 25 when his Mars progressed was at 21 degrees 57 minutes of Aquarius and stationary. Had he lived, it would have turned retrograde in 1997 at age 26. On July 5th, 2018, a BET documentary featured an interview with the uncle of a one-time person of interest in Tupac Shakur's 1996 drive-by murder that has resulted in a renewed look at the unsolved for almost 20 years. But I recently saw a news headline saying that they were getting close to arresting a suspect in his murder. I had also seen an interesting talk at UAC by Elizabeth Grace about the horoscope living on after death, which was something I'd previously thought about. So I think it will be interesting to see what comes of the investigation in light of the August 11th, 2018 solar eclipse at 18 Leo 42, which is opposite his natal Mars at 18 Aquarius 25. I'm going to skip Sandra O as well. Because Elon Musk is more interesting right now and has been in the news a lot. So he was born on June 28, 1971 with, guess what, Mercury out of bounds. Big surprise. 1985, his progressed Mercury went retrograde at age 14, and progressed Mercury was back in bounds by age 20. Then in 1993, progressed Moon went out of bounds at age 22. In 1995, he had a progressed new moon solar eclipse at age 24. Interestingly, he began a PhD in applied physics and material sciences at Stanford University in 1995, but dropped out 2 days later to pursue an entrepreneurial career. In 1999, his progressed Mars retrograde came to his natal Mars by conjunction at age 25. His progressed Moon was back in bounds. He subsequently co-founded Zip2, a web software company which was acquired by Compaq for $340 million in 1999. In 2000, he married Jennifer Justine Wilson. Musk then founded X.com, an online payment company. It merged with Confinity in 2000 and became PayPal, which was bought by eBay for $1.5 billion in October of 2002. In May of 2002, Musk founded SpaceX, an aerospace manufacturer and space transport services company, of which he is CEO and lead designer. He co-founded Tesla Inc., an electric vehicle and solar panel manufacturer in 2003, and operates as its CEO and product architect. 2006, his progressed Moon went out of bounds again, age 35. That year, he inspired the creation of Solar City, a solar energy services company that is now a subsidiary of Tesla and operates as its chairman. In 2010, he had a progressed full moon lunar eclipse conjunct the North Node at age 39. That year, he married Tallulah Riley. 2011, his progressed Moon was back in bounds, age 40. 2012, he divorced Tallulah. In 2015, he co-founded OpenAI, a nonprofit research company that aims to promote friendly artificial intelligence. In July 2016, he co-founded Neuralink, a neurotechnology company focused on developing brain-computer interfaces, and is its CEO. 2013, his progressed sun was opposite progressed Mars, which was conjunct, they were both conjunct the nodes, age 42. That year, he married Tallulah Riley again. 2016, they divorced again. 2017, progressed Venus at 21 Leo 57 was opposite his progressed Mars retrograde, age 46. And last month on July 8th, transiting Mars went out of bounds. On July 17th, transiting Mercury opposed his natal Mars. That day, he had the Twitter spat with the Thai cave rescue diver over the submarine that he had offered to the rescuers on July 6th, when transiting Sun was conjunct his out-of-bounds Mercury. And then he apologized to the rescue diver on July 18th, when transiting Venus was conjunct his progressed Mercury. On July 25th, transiting Mercury turned retrograde opposite his Mars, so we will have 2 more passes of the Mercury transit opposite Mars. What will happen next? In 2020, he has his progressed moon will go out of bounds again at age 49. 2026, he will have a progressed new moon solar eclipse, 27 degrees Leo 15, conjunct progressed Venus at age 53. In addition to his primary business pursuits, Musk has envisioned a high-speed transportation system known as the Hyperloop, and has proposed a vertical takeoff and landing supersonic jet electric aircraft with electric fan propulsion known as the Musk Electric Jet. Musk has stated that the goals of SpaceX, Tesla, and Solar City revolve around his vision to change the world and humanity. His goals include reducing global warming through sustainable energy production and reducing the risk of human extinction by establishing a human colony on Mars. How Mars retrograde in Aquarius is that? Okay, and then Missy Elliott was born a few days later, July 1st, 1971, also with Mercury out of bounds. At the age of 4 in 1975, she wanted to be a performer, and her biographer states she would sing and perform for her family. Elliott blossomed during this part of her life. She enjoyed school for the friendship she formed, though she had little interest in school or intelligence tests, and she was advanced 2 years ahead of her former class from 2nd to 4th grade. Her move in grades caused isolation, and she purposely failed, eventually returning to her previous class at her mother's request. In later years, she feared no one would take her seriously because she was always the class clown. In 1982, progressed Mars went retrograde at age 11. In the late 80s, Elliott formed an all-female R&B group called Phase, which was later renamed to Sista. 1990, progressed Mars conjunct natal Mars, 21 Aquarius 21, age 19. 1990, she had a progressed new moon solar eclipse in Cancer, age 21. Her album, The Real World, produced the singles She's a Bitch, All in My Grill, and top 5 hit Hot Boys. The remix broke the record for most weeks at #1 on the US R&B chart on the issue dated January 15th, 2000, as well as spending 8 weeks at #1 on the Hot Rap singles from December 4th, 1999 to March 25th, 2000. In 2000, her progressed moon entered Out of Bounds, age 29. In 2002, Elliott wrote a letter on behalf of PETA to the mayor of her hometown, Portsmouth, Virginia, asking that all shelter animals be neutered or spayed before being adopted. 2005, progressed moon exits Out of Bounds at age 34. 2007, she had a full moon lunar eclipse conjunct the nodes, age 36. 2010, progressed Sun opposed progressed Mars conjunct the nodes, age 39. And in June of 2011, Elliott told People magazine that her absence from the music industry was due to a hyperthyroidism disorder known as Graves' disease. After treatment, her symptoms stabilized, and she announced that she wanted to get back to her career. On January 27, 2017, at midnight, saw the full-length release to a new Elliott single titled, I'm Better. A 2017 petition asked for the removal of a Confederate monument in her hometown in favor of a Missy Elliott statue. On July 17, 2018, transiting Mercury opposed her Mars. And in July, Missy Elliott teased fans by appearing on a snippet nicknamed ID by Skrillex. She has 2 more passes of Mercury opposite Mars, August 2nd, that's today, and while it's retrograde, and then after it turns direct on August 31st, it will hit it again. In 2020, she'll have the progressed Venus opposite progressed Mars retrograde at age 49, it should be. 2021, progressed new moon solar eclipse, 27 Leo 15, conjunct progressed Venus at age 50. Wanda, I know we're over. Should I keep going? I have a few more, and then I have a little bit about 2018. Probably.
Just since this is the last meeting, so there's no, time constraint there.
Okay, I think I have maybe 20 more minutes, so. Okay. Julian Assange was born on July 3rd, 1971. His progressed Mars turned retrograde at age 7. I mention this to illustrate how long it takes for Mars to slow down, become stationary, and turn retrograde in a progression. Mars can move up to 3/4 of a degree per day, but in this case, it moved only 24 minutes in 7 days, which correlated to 7 years in secondary progressions. Then it also takes 7 years by progression to get back to its natal position, which occurred in 1985 when he was 14. In 1990, he had a progressed new moon solar eclipse, age 19. Approximately 15 years later, in 2005, a progressed lunar eclipse conjunct within a degree of the North Node, age 34. In 2006, he founded WikiLeaks. 2008, progressed Sun opposite progressed Mars, age 37. 2010, WikiLeaks published the leaked information from Chelsea Manning. 2012, progressed Venus opposite progressed Mars retrograde, age 41. He was granted asylum by Ecuador in August of 2012. and has remained in the Embassy of Ecuador in London since then. Assange has held Ecuadorian citizenship since 12 December 2017. July 3rd, 2018, progressed Moon opposed progressed Mars retrograde, exactly conjunct the progressed nodes. July 18th, 2018, transiting Mercury at 21 degrees Leo 33, opposed his natal Mars. July 26th, transiting Mercury, stationed retrograde at 23 Leo 27. And on July 27th, the Ecuadorian president, Lenin Moreno, the new president, confirmed that his government is working with British officials toward brokering Mr. Assange's exit from the embassy, potentially putting the Australian-born activist on the path to face criminal charges abroad relating to his role running WikiLeaks. July 31st, Assange said he wanted the Australian government to urgently intervene in his case as he faces the imminent prospect of expulsion from his refuge. August 1st, transiting Mercury at 21 degrees Leo 33, retrograde, opposed Mars a second time. September 1st, it will do the same for the third time. 2019, he'll have a progressed new moon solar eclipse, 2715 Leo conjunct Venus, age 48, whereas Missy will be 50 when this happened, and Elon Musk will be 53 for this same progression. Corey Feldman was born on July 16, 1971, 13 days after Assange, and 4 days after Mars went retrograde. His retrograde Mars at 21 degrees Aquarius 47 is 14 minutes different than Julian's direct one. And like all of them born during this period, it's conjunct the North Node. In addition, Corey's ascendant of 18 degrees Leo is 22 minutes away from the coming solar eclipse of August 11th. He's been in the news a lot lately regarding his claims of having been sexually molested as a child actor, and I would expect there's more to come. Feldman started his career at the age of 3, appearing in a McDonald's commercial. In his youth, he appeared in over 100 commercials, television commercials, and on 50 television series, including The Bad News Bears, Mork and Mindy, 8 is Enough, One Day at a Time, and Cheers, all the popular ones in the 80s. 1997, he had his progressed new moon solar eclipse at age 6. He then went on to be featured in several consecutive high-grossing movies. In 1986, he stated that he had begun the Emancipation Proclamation in Hollywood at age 15 when he was granted emancipation from his parents. He stated that he was worth $1 million by age 15, and by the time the judge ordered the bank records to come forward, only $40,000 remained. 1987, he appeared with Corey Haim in The Lost Boys. He was married to Vanessa Marcil from 89 to 93. And in 1992, he had a progressed full moon eclipse in Aquarius conjunct his North Node at age 21. 1996, progressed Sun in Leo opposed Mars and Aquarius, both conjunct the nodes at age 24. He met model Susie Sprague in a nightclub in 2002. They married in October of that year on the final episode of the first season of The Surreal Life. The ceremony was co-officiated by a rabbi and by MC Hammer, an ordained minister. 2006, he had a progressed new moon solar eclipse, 27 Leo conjunct Venus. He was age 35. In October of 2009, he and Susie split. And a month later, she filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, sought spousal support as well as full custody. Took 5 years, and their divorce became final in 2014. That year, his progressed moon went out of bounds. Feldman is a Democrat and an advocate for animal welfare and animal rights, and has been a vegetarian since he was about 13, even appearing with his wife in a PETA commercial promoting vegetarianism. 2015 and 2016, he received Paws of Fame awards by Wildlife Way Station for his dedication to animal rights. On November 22nd, 2016, he married his longtime girlfriend. The ceremony was officiated by producer Marklyn Kennedy at Elton John's Fizz Champagne Lounge in Las Vegas. Sorry, I laughed. August 21st, 2017, the transiting solar eclipse at 28 Leo 53 was conjunct his progressed Mercury at 28 Leo 29. He has stated that he was molested by a man he's identified as Ron Crimson, who was an assistant to Feldman's father. He also identified Ron as having facilitated his initiation into drug addiction. On October 25th, 2017, in response to the Harvey Weinstein sexual abuse allegations, Feldman started an Indiegogo campaign to finance a film about his life that will expose the secret child sexual abuse that he claims is just as common in Hollywood as sexism and sexual assault. This part of his life is also depicted in the Lifetime Channel original movie A Tale of Two Corys. On October 30th, he appeared on the Today Show and named child agent Marty Weiss as one of his abusers. On November 2nd, he appeared on Dr. Oz and named a former personal assistant. On November 14th, again on Dr. Oz, he named a former talent agent and owner of an underage club in Hollywood as another abuser. In 2018, he's having a reverse nodal return, as are all of these guys born in 1971. And in 2033, his progressed Mars goes direct at age 62. And the last one here is Candace Kane, who was born August 29th, 1971, as Brendan McDaniel with a fraternal twin, Dylan. Her moon is out of bounds. In 1983, progressed Mars went direct at 11 Aquarius 53, conjunct the south node of Neptune at age 11. She performed in drag in the 1990s in many New York City nightclubs. In 1993, progressed Mars moved back to conjunct natal Mars at age 22. In 1996, Mars turned direct, conjunct the north node and the south node of Neptune. That year, she came out as a woman. And as an aside to the Mars story, but interesting to the transgender part, progressed Sun was at 0 degrees Libra, conjunct Pluto at 29 Virgo 35. In 2007, her progressed Pluto went into Libra at age 37. And that year, she became the first transgender person to have a primetime TV role playing Carmelita Rainier, a trans woman having an affair with married New York Attorney General Patrick Darling, played by William Baldwin, on the ABC primetime drama Dirty Sexy Money. And then also born in the shadow of Mars retrograde was Amy Poehler on September 16th, Lance Armstrong on September 18th, Alfonso Ribeiro on September 21st, and then on October 21st, Mars reached 21 Aquarius 57 and the retrograde shadow ends. So I have about 8 minutes more to go on the 2018 Mars retrograde, or we can finish now. Which would you prefer, Wanda?
If you want to continue, I'm fine with that.
Okay, here we go. So that brings us to the 2018 Mars retrograde in Aquarius. On April 26th, Mars and Pluto started their new cycle with their conjunction at 21 degrees Capricorn 17. May 3rd, Kilauea started erupting from a new fissure. May 12th, the Mars retrograde shadow began. On the 15th, Uranus went into Taurus. June 21st, Venus opposed Mars at 9 degrees Leo in Aquarius as the Sun went into Cancer. I noted that Trump's Pluto is 10 degrees Leo because the next day, Sarah Sanders was asked to leave the Red Hen restaurant, and the day after that, Maxine Waters suggested continuing to publicly confront members of the Trump administration. Waters was not born during the 1939 Aquarius Mars retrograde, but interestingly, was born the year before on August 15, 1938, with Mars as well as Pluto and the Sun in Leo. The red arrow indicates that Mars turned retrograde June 26th at 9 Aquarius, conjunct the South Node, and within a degree of an opposition to Trump's Pluto. June 26th, the Supreme Court upholds the travel ban of certain Muslim countries. June 27th, Supreme Court Justice Kennedy announced his retirement. June 30th, the right-wing protest in Portland, Oregon was crashed by some anti-fascist protesters and declared a riot that evening. And then on July 8th, Mars went out of bounds. That day was when the Thai divers began bringing the boys out that were trapped in the cave. On the 10th, the divers finished bringing the boys out. On July 12th was a partial solar eclipse, the first one at 20 Cancer 41 opposite Pluto, which was conjunct its own planetary node, South Node. July 16th, the Trump-Putin meeting was held in Helsinki and immediately called Treason Summit. July 20th, retrograde Mars was conjunct the Moon's South Node in Aquarius. That very day, Trump invited Putin to the White House, and Dan Coates, his national intelligence director, was told on live TV about it and was visibly surprised. Coates has Pluto at 5 Leo 06, and progressed Sun, progressed Jupiter, and progressed Pluto, all between 6 and 7 degrees of Leo. July 24th, Mars was conjunct the 1939 Mars retrograde point at 4 Aquarius 42, and conjunct the approaching 727 lunar eclipse point at 4 Aquarius 45. July 25th, Sun was square Uranus, also in square to the nodes, and Mercury stationed retrograde within a degree of conjunction to the 1939 Mercury retrograde point in Leo. That day, a lake of water was discovered under the surface of Mars, or it was announced that day. Whether it was discovered that day or not, I don't know. The arrow indicates the next day the sun was opposite Mars retrograde at 4 degrees Leo Aquarius, signaling the middle of the Mars retrograde, and they were conjunct the north and south nodes respectively. On July 27th, we had the lunar eclipse at 4 Aquarius 45, conjunct the south node. Still to come, the August 11th partial solar eclipse at 18 Leo 42. And then the day after the eclipse, Mars retrograde goes into Capricorn. Then on August 18th, Mercury stations direct at 11 Leo 32, conjunct the north node of Neptune, and opposite the Mars retrograde point of this year. This may be the time of understanding and beginning to assimilate some of the lessons of this eclipse season with Mars retrograde in Aquarius. August 27th, Mars goes direct at 28 Capricorn 37. September 10th, Mars goes back into Aquarius, and also that day, Pluto is conjunct the south node of Saturn at 18 degrees Capricorn 51. I've noted that the south node of Pluto is very close as well, 19 Capricorn 04. September 24th, Mars is back in bounds, days after the equinox. The following day, Mars is conjunct the south node for the third time. On October 8th, Mars reaches 9 degrees Aquarius in 13 minutes, and the retrograde shadow ends. And lastly, on October 26th, 2018, Pluto is conjunct the south node of Pluto at 18 Capricorn 55, with the south node of Saturn close by at 18 Capricorn 21. And here's the graphic of planetary declination for Sun, Mercury, Venus, and Mars for the 5 months from May 8th to October 8th of 2018. Again, the two horizontal red lines represent the out of bounds point. So you can see green Venus and blue Mercury just above the line before the Mars retrograde started, and then pink Mars down here below the line after the retrograde started. And as before, the vertical lines indicate the middle, or the beginning, the middle, and the end of the Mars retrograde. So, thanks for sticking with me. What do you guys think?
Wow, that was just absolutely amazing and just chock full of information.
I know, a little overwhelming, I have to say.
No, I think it was just absolutely brilliant. Does anyone have any questions or comments? We can take 1 or 2 questions. Just unmute yourself. Okay, looks like, I'm not sure how to pronounce this name, Garari in the chat said this has made everything so real, the data and research so needed.
Thank you so much. You know, I had so much fun doing this, and it just kept ballooning. You know, I kept finding all these connections, and I felt like I had to present it, and I'm so glad that you found it useful. Thank you.
I just wanted to make the quick comment of especially Tupac and Missy Elliott and Elon Musk. I could definitely see the Mars retrograde working, you know, the Mars retrograde in Aquarius working in their charts, because all 3 of them were very pioneering and very forward, forward thinking as far as, in each one of their fields. And way ahead of their time.
Exactly. And I skipped Mark Wahlberg and Sandra Oh because they were very long, but theirs were similar too. And what I wanted to illustrate is how they were born at different points in the cycle. So they all have had the same progressions, but at different ages.
Yeah, yeah. But the similarities are just, that's what just makes it so like, wow,
Yeah, so Mars retrograde in Aquarius.
Right. Okay, last call for any questions or other comments.
Thank you all
Okay.
so much for sticking with it.
Thank you so much for all of this brilliant information that you've presented to us. So everyone, would you please thank Sue Hillyard.
Thanks, Sue. That was great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sue.
Bye all.
All right, guys, we will see you all next time.